What if you had a deceased grandfather whom you were particularly fond of, and what if out of the blue, some stranger came up to you and said, "Hey, that's my grandpa." And then, lest you think this stranger is somehow trying to ingratiate himself with you, he adds, "And everything you thought you knew about grandpa is wrong. Here, let me tell you what he really said and did during his lifetime." The stranger then proceeds to inform you that almost everything you thought you knew about your grandfather was not just wrong, but the exact opposite of what he, the stranger, is now saying about your grandfather, much of which you find immensely disturbing. Would that endear the stranger to you? Every proponent of so-called Abrahamism apparently thinks so. I'll explain, but first let's define Abrahamism. Because the patriarch Abraham is an important figure in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, all three religions, according to the doctrine of Abrahamism, share a common root or ancestor that has great potential to bridge gaps and foster growth, cooperation, and even fraternity between the religions. And this position is held by virtually everyone. It's certainly the mainstream position in academia, media, among talking heads everywhere, even, if not especially, the Pope, Francis. That said, it's clear that few of its proponents have given this Abrahamic business much thought. The crux of the matter is this: how is one people's appropriation of another people's heritage, which is precisely what Abrahamism is all about, supposed to help them get along? Consider some very important but habitually ignored distinctions. First, whatever differences Christians and Jews have, Christians, who chronologically come after the Jews, accept the Hebrew Bible, or Old Testament, as it is. They do not add to, take away from, or distort its text. Islam does the complete opposite. As the latest newcomer, to legitimize itself, it too relies on the figures of the Old and New Testaments, for the weight of antiquity and authority that's attached to their names. But it completely perverts their characters in a way that validates the later and different teachings of Muhammad. In other words, although Islam comes after Christianity and Judaism, it does not rely on their scriptures as they are, the way Christians rely on the Hebrew scriptures as they are, but rather Islam recasts them to fit its own narrative and agenda, including to show how the scriptures of Jews and Christians have been corrupted, as Muslims maintain, with the much later Quran reflecting the original truths they supposedly once contained. One need only consider how the man whom this mendacious project is named after, I speak of course of Abraham, has been exploited by and for Islam. Jews and Christians focus on different aspects of Abraham. The former see him as their patriarch in the flesh, the latter as their patriarch in faith or in spirit. But they both rely on the same verbatim account of Abraham as found in Genesis. This is key. Make note of it. In the Muslim account, however, not only does Ibrahim, quit his country on God's promise that he will make him a great nation, as reflected in Genesis 12, but Abraham exemplifies the hatred Muslims are obligated to have for all non-Muslims. As Allah informs Muslims in Quran 64, "You have a good example in Abraham and those who followed him. For they said to their people, 'We disown you and the idols that you worship besides Allah. We renounce you. Enmity and hatred shall forever reign between us until you believe in Allah alone.'" That last bit about eternal hatred until you believe in Allah isn't in Genesis now, is it? In fact, and as it happens, this verse about Abraham, Quran 64, is the cornerstone verse that all radicals cite as proof that all Muslims must hate all non-Muslims. Thus, after quoting this Abrahamic verse, the Islamic State once declared in a statement to the West that, "We hate you first and foremost because you are disbelievers," or infidels, kafirs. As for any political grievances, these are secondary, the Islamic State says. Quote, "The fact is, even if you were to stop bombing us, imprisoning us, torturing us, vilifying us, and usurping our lands," this is ISIS to the West, "we would continue to hate you because our primary reason for hating you will not cease to exist until you embrace Islam. Even if you were to pay jizya and live under the authority of Islam in humiliation, we would continue to hate you." Such is the mutilation that the patriarch Abraham has undergone in Islam. Not only is he not a source of commonality between Muslims on the one hand and Jews and Christians on the other, he is the chief figure to justify Muslim hatred for Jews and Christians, until you believe in Allah alone, as the verse says. By the way, Islam's appropriation and mutilation of revered biblical figures spares no one, not even Jesus Christ. No doubt you've heard, often repeatedly, that Muslims revere Jesus as a sinless prophet and miracle worker born of a virgin. All well and good, but much lesser mentioned and known is that the Quran rejects and Muslims do not accept the most cardinal points about Christ. They reject that he was the Son of God, and they reject that he was crucified and resurrected for the sins of mankind. In fact, those who insist that Christ is the Son of God, namely Christians, are accursed and deserve nothing but relentless jihad. See Quran 5:72, 73, and 9:29, 9:30. So while Muslims accept that Jesus will return on Judgment Day, that, Islam teaches, will be so he can smash all the crosses in the world, because they signify his death and resurrection, which, as seen, Islam and Islam's Christ, Isa, vehemently deny. And so he can cancel the jizya, meaning Christians can no longer pay to remain Christian, but will henceforth only have two choices: embrace Islam or die. Christ will also make it a point to slaughter all the pigs during his second coming because, well, Islam hates swine. Again, should Islam's appropriation of Christ, or rather introduction of an antichrist, be seen as a source of shared commonality between Christians and Muslims? Or something else, something potentially more sinister? Let's go back to my opening analogy about that grandpa you loved. It's one thing for a stranger to accept and honor your grandfather the way he really was, and as you knew him, the way Christians do with the figures of the Old Testament. It's something completely different for a stranger to appropriate and reconfigure your grandfather in a way that validates his hostility to you, the way Muslims do with the figures of the Bible. In short, and to all you mindless proponents of Abrahamism, it's time to wake up.